Hi, I'm Nicholas Tregellis, the Operations Manager for NES China. I've been with the company for a little over 7 years, working for NES out of Dubai, Houston. I've recently relocated from Houston to Shanghai, China, and I'm just here to share some experiences about relocating during a pandemic. The relocation process compared to when I relocated to Dubai and Houston was primarily different. It was far longer, is probably the very obvious and most apparent difference. I think a lot of it was also the lack of certainty. When you are relocating, a lot of the planning and work you put in is based on the logistics and getting the timing right, and you just have no control over that at all. So those would be some of the main differences that I found, just the flexibility that was needed with this relocation, as opposed to the times relocating to Dubai and Houston. The process was impacted quite heavily. I accepted the position, the internal transfer, in February, and the initial plan was to fly me over in May. Due to my visa expiring in America on the 10th of April, I had to relocate and leave the country, and it was too uncertain that I could do a day return into Canada or Mexico. It was presented to me I could work in the UK from home, stay with my parents for a while, or work with my current boss in South Korea. So I chose the latter because I'd be 1 hour difference from the team in Shanghai in terms of time difference. And I wanted to spend as much time with him as possible, just to get an understanding of the region, kind of acclimatise to the APAC, APAC countries prior to officially relocating to Shanghai. That was supposed to be on a 3-month visa, so I had a 2-week quarantine period, and then I was in South Korea, supposed to be for a month. We'd sort of incorrectly assumed, but that was actually for 4 months. So after 3, I had to get an extension. We even pre-booked flights in case the extension didn't occur. Luckily, it was granted. And then eventually I went straight from South Korea into Shanghai, China. I just had 2 weeks quarantine there. I've just come out a few days ago, and I've just had my first weekend unpacking and getting settled into a hotel. And so it's been quite a long journey. It's been about 4 months from leaving Houston to finally arriving in Shanghai. It was very different to what I was expecting, to tell you the truth. So I had 2 weeks when I was in South Korea, and then I was in Seoul for 3 months, 4 months, and then I had a second stint in Shanghai. That was easier in some ways, but harder in others. Psychologically, I knew I'd done it, so that part was quite easy. But the hotel, you don't get a choice in the hotel. And it wasn't particularly great at the Shanghai when they ran out of good options. So there was very small window, which can make you feel quite claustrophobic, and the food wasn't particularly great. So the first quarantine was actually easier, despite having not gone through it before. I think when I moved to South Korea, especially, it was in early April, and I was the first batch of people that was being put into quarantine, especially in the premises I was in. So you sort of assume, a bit like checking into a hotel, that they know what they're doing and you just follow their guidance. But you realise quite quickly that it's not hotel staff that are helping you out. It's primarily medical students. So it's new to everyone. So you turn up totally blindsided by what's going on, having no understanding of what to expect, hoping someone can be there to kind of hold your hand and then make you feel secure. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen. So you have to have a lot of patience. It takes a lot of time. I think I landed from Houston in 4 in the afternoon. I landed in South Korea, and it was 12 hours from when my flight touched down to when I was actually checked into my accommodation, because they had to actually find somewhere for me to stay, travel there, do all the necessary precautions, etc. So just be prepared that it can get a bit unpleasant. Advice I would give is carry water on you, just a couple of bottles of water for the long haul, and make sure that you bring books for the quarantine period to be a key one, because you can kill several hours quite easily without feeling too repetitive, whereas watching 2 or 3 movies back to back, it's not particularly pleasant. The food, you have no choice in anything. You can't leave your hotel room. So you're in a hotel. Some people brought swimming trunks with them, thinking they could use the gym and the pool. It's just not going to happen. You are in the room for 2 weeks. No cigarette smoke. I don't smoke myself, but if you do, make sure you bring nicotine patches. I'd advise people to bring painkillers, paracetamol, anything like that, because I had a couple of headaches come on during the quarantine period. Deliveries can be difficult as well, especially if you're an expat into a new region. You might not know anyone locally that can have deliveries made. My hotel in Korea didn't allow them anyhow. So bring food with you, even if it's sort of noodles or biscuits or something that has a bit of a taste of home is nice, because you have no choice in the food they bring, and it's quite repetitive. You know, they're just there to make sure you survive the 2 weeks. So they're not particularly worried about how much fun you have during the quarantine stay. So the food's not particularly great. There's not much choice. Of course, if you have dietary requirements, they can provide those for you. But I would just say prepare for the worst and be as plan accordingly and bring as much as you can, just to make your quarantine stay, the 2 weeks, as pleasant as possible. I think for me the most challenging aspect of the relocation was just the lack of control that you have in the process. I like being orderly and knowing what's coming and pre-planning best I can, and I think you just have to be aware that you can plan and prepare to fail essentially when the plans don't occur. But I think if you've got that mindset and you've got the flexibility and good people around you, it's a lot less impactful than you might think. But it's certainly a daunting prospect, not knowing when you'll next be able to be on a plane, when you can actually arrive in the country that you're relocating to. And also I've got to know the team for a few months and been managing them and working very closely with them completely remotely, making it work through video calls and FaceTime calls, which is difficult because you get to know people a lot better in person, face to face, which luckily I've done now. We just had a team lunch yesterday. It was my birthday during my Shanghai quarantine last week, so they bought me a birthday cake yesterday. It was very nice of them, and I had a belated birthday with the team. I think what's gone well is people's genuine understanding and their sympathies to the situation. Everyone I speak to, the response isn't a cold, well, you tried to relocate, it was all on you. It was quite a nice sort of welcome. Oh, you poor thing, how can we help? Especially in the expats in Korea and China. They've been there themselves, they've relocated themselves. So some of the stories I tell them about when I left quarantine, having to get a tuk-tuk and my luggage on there, going 6 kilometers across Shanghai, they're very understanding. I think so many people have offered to help out in any way possible. That's been something that's been quite good to come out of all of this. And also the support NES has given me and the flexibility there, supporting increased flight costs, senior managers and travel logistics people checking in just to see how I'm getting on has been very comforting as well. So just the feeling that you matter and you've been supported has been quite something that's gone well and something that's been quite a nice takeaway from all of this. Let's face it, fairly unpleasant situation to be in. But attitude's more important than circumstance, I think, and that's really shined through here, which is nice to see. I'm settling in well. It's nice to finally be in the end destination. So I got out of quarantine on Friday. Been here about a week, meeting the team. It's been the longer it's been, the more sort of rewarding it is. So it does feel very nice. I can just finally relax, knowing that I'm arrived, I'm settled in, got my bank account sorted out today, my phone sorted out yesterday. So it's all come through to the end of it, and I'm very glad to be here as a result. Now that I'm here, I think I'm looking forward most just to actually settling, finding an apartment that's my own, having my furniture that's being shipped across from Houston unpacked. It's been about 4 months of living out of 2 suitcases and 2 suits, so I'm looking forward just to actually calling somewhere home and not just living in a hotel on room service and experiencing those comforts. I've been creating lists of things to see, various temples and tourist attractions and things of that nature, and clubs and societies. I wasn't able really to do that in Korea because I was leaving. There was always an end date, but now I can actually join different clubs and make friends and actually start building a life here, which is nice. So those are some of the things that I'm doing, and it's such an interesting region. I'm learning new things every day about how things work, different apps to get, different locations to try and explore. So that part can finally begin, which is great. I think that the advice I would give would be two kind of main areas. First would just be psychologically, if you're relocating during a time of this nature, don't assume it's going to go your way. Don't assume it's going to go particularly well. Just prepare for the worst, because you make plans and then you can't stick to them. So if you're too rigid in that, it's going to impact you, I think, quite, psychologically, would have an impact. But you can prepare. I mean, let your family and friends and colleagues know you are relocating. Then very well maybe periods of time you don't have phone access, internet access, just so they don't worry about you or rely on you for things. You don't let them down. Bring snacks, food, books, everything along those lines when you're for the quarantine. Bring cash as well. If you know which country you're going to be stopping in over for a few months, just make sure you've got cash. Don't rely on the airport like you would going on holiday, because they will literally, authorities will grab you straight off the airplane, put you in the quarantine section, put you on the train or bus, and you just don't have any flexibility on that. So stock up as best you can. And especially if you are relocating and it's not just a business trip, bring as many documents as you might need. I luckily brought my degree certificate, I brought my UK driving license, the originals, and they were all needed to open up a bank account to make that process a lot smoother. So talk to people who live in the country if you can, even on group forums, friends, family, colleagues, anybody, just to get a good understanding of how things work, and just try and prepare best you can. But keep in the back of your mind, things aren't going to go to plan. So just try and roll with the punches best you can if you're relocating during this time. I would also recommend, if you're booking travel, hotels, flights, anything along those lines, do even pay a bit extra to have the option of a cancellation or a refund. I've had to cancel flights, hotel accommodations, and it would have been very costly if I'd gone for the less expensive option with less flexibility. So along the lines of not knowing how things are going to go, make sure you have that. Also have emergency numbers written down. Have cash, have the ability to phone people, because when I was actually released from my quarantine in Shanghai, the quarantine in Korea, as it was a hotel, they ordered me a taxi. In Shanghai, they didn't. They just said they didn't do that. So I had to walk for about 25 minutes in the heat with 2 suitcases, trying to find a taxi. No one picked me up, so I found a Didi, one of those tuk-tuk things, and put my 2 suitcases strapped to that with some string, and sat in the back and went. But luckily, I had local currency to pay the gentleman, and I did have emergency numbers written down with my colleagues if I needed to borrow somebody's mobile, go into a shop, an establishment, something along those lines. So don't rely on technology as we do these days. Do just think, right, what if my phone runs out of batteries? How can I do that? So just think about how you would have traveled 10, 15 years ago, because you very well may need to work to the same capacity as that, not rely on technology or anything along those lines. Yeah, I think if I wasn't traveling with NES, and I was just trying to make this move on my own, I think I would have really struggled. The management team in Houston were very supportive, and they worked cohesively with the team in China and the APAC region to get the dates aligned, get the visas in place. The PROs and the visa logistics teams in China and Korea would give advice and real-time updates and check in on how things were going. Even small things, I mean, other people on the planes, they were flying in, sorry, they didn't know they would need to be in quarantine. they didn't prepare it at all. So a gentleman I was chatting to on the bus on the way to the first quarantine, I had about 7 books. I had movies downloaded, just knowing that it was going to happen, because the team here were able to preempt that. But he didn't even know quarantine would be needed. And I think it was such an ever-changing, the goalposts were constantly moving. But I was able to get good real-time updates from the team. I could run through what-if scenarios with them, go through certain eventualities, and have backup plans as a result, get things pre-booked. So if I went on my own, I just wouldn't have the network to get that information. We utilise the NES visa business partner very closely in Shanghai. They've been through it with other suppliers, and they could give some real-life case studies for me. So I think if I had to do it again on my own, I would have really struggled. But luckily with NES's support, it certainly made it bearable. And it's been just continued care and support by various members of different NES teams.